All right. So as people start filing in, I just want to introduce myself. So my name is Becca, and I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books, although I'm currently in Saratoga Springs studying at Skidmore College right now. But Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. So you can pretty much find us right outside of Cambridge. And before we begin, I'd just like to let everybody know of a number of other virtual events coming up in November. So the first being Stephanie Ganji, who's the author of Carry the Dog, and she'll be in conversation with Caroline Levitt on November 4th. And the other being Lynn Reeves, author of The Dangers of an Ordinary Night, in conversation with Hank Philippi Ryan on November 9th. So you can register for these events as well as some other events happening later in the month on our website, belmontbooks.com, which is also where you can purchase tonight's book, A Certain Appeal, and I'll be sending a link out to that shortly. And if you have any concerns during the event, please feel free to message me in the chat. But if you have any questions for the author, please put them into the Q&A section on Zoom, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and we'll hope to get to as many of your questions as we can. So we're so excited to welcome Vanessa King and Viola Vainglory. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them, and then I'll turn the event over to them. So first and foremost, we have Vanessa King, who is the author of the new novel, A Certain Appeal. King spent 2 years in the New York City burlesque scene, and her debut novel is a love letter to the dynamic, sexy world of twirling tassels and eyelash glue. When not writing, she enjoys reading and wielding a glue gun, and she currently resides in Austin, Texas, and lives with her husband and daughter. And then we also have burlesque performer Viola Vainglory here with us tonight. Viola has been in the world of burlesque since 2011, prior to which she spent years doing theater work and costuming. Viola has performed at many renowned burlesque festivals, and she's also a regular MC for Alley Cat Cabaret at Skull's Rainbow Room, which was recently named one of the best places to see burlesque in the world by Lonely Planet. So we're so excited to have you both here with us this evening, and without further ado, I'll turn the event over to them, and be on the lookout for a link in the chat to where to purchase the book. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Becca. Well, I'm your FemC for the evening, so I guess I'll kick things off.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Viola Vainglory, and I am thrilled to be here talking with Vanessa Lee King about her debut novel, A Certain Appeal. Isn't it so beautiful, lovelies?
So lovely.
I have to say, Vanessa, you and I did not know each other before you reached out to me about doing this interview.
No.
And so I did not go into this book with any particular love for Vanessa, other than that she thought I was cool enough to interview her. And I loved this book so much. It was such a joy to read. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you came into the world of creative fiction writing?
Yeah, I mean, my first official foray into it was through a novel writing course with the Gotham Writers Workshop. And it was a Christmas gift from my mother-in-law in 2010. So going back a little bit, and yeah, so I started it right in the new year. It was Monday nights for about 6 weeks, and it was fantastic. So I had a great instructor, but more than that, those of us who were in the class together for a while and enjoyed each other's writing. I mean, there was a sort of a weeding out process. We ended up forming a critique group for the entire time I was in New York. So 3.5 years, we met up at least once a month or once every couple of weeks and exchanged writing. So that's what got me going. So I wrote most of the manuscript before they had an intervention and told me I'd written a sequel and needed to write the first book, which was fair, like rude at the time, but very accurate. So I did write that and queried and moved and had a baby and moved several times and was querying. Life just happened and kept happening.
Life finds a way, I suppose.
I know, like, it's funny how it does that. You make plans and then it's like, guess what? Nope. No. Also, new adult, not happening anymore. You got to write something else. And I did. And that's what A Certain Appeal was.
So the book is so lovely. I really, really enjoyed it. It's a romance novel. It is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but it is such a clever retelling of Pride and Prejudice, set in the New York burlesque scene. Can you talk to us a little bit about the story and kind of how you came to this particular version for the retelling?
Absolutely. Well, I was querying that new adult book that is no more. I mean, it's in a drawer, but like, it's fine.
It exists. It's just not the main thing right now.
It's in my heart mostly, and many files. I was complaining to a friend, we were texting about, I'm in querying hell. I need to work on something. And she's like, you do. And you have this whole burlesque experience you had. You have to do something with it. It's like, agreed, but what? And then she says in passing that she's working on a retelling of The Wizard of Oz set at a music festival, which is still inspired. And Erin, go finish that. But I was like, I've had an idea. Bye. I mean, I love you. Bye. And started writing immediately. So I started writing out the outline for a Pride and Prejudice retelling using that burlesque background. I didn't have, and no other book came to mind, no other classic story. It was just going to be Pride and Prejudice. And it just went from there. I still have the notebook with my outlines.
Oh,
I know, keep it.
it's so cute. One of the things I really loved, so I am a huge Austenite in addition to being a burlesque person. And I have read a lot of retellings of different Austen novels. And one of the things I was really struck by with this is the sort of parallels between the New York real estate scene and what you're dealing with the sort of the club being at the mercy of the owners. Can you talk to me a little bit about like kind of other parallels or that parallel that you really enjoyed kind of digging into with the book?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that one was very clear. I mean, you have in the original Pride and Prejudice, you have the Bennett sisters who are at the mercy of the laws at the time that said that the male family member next of kin gets the house, which is not at all them. It's their weirdo cousin who loves potatoes, which is true, a 2005 edition, but we still respect that. It's canon now. And as such, the folks at Meryton are subject to the whims of the owner of the club who changes schedules and things at his convenience and is planning, as we find out very early in the book, no spoilers, to sell the venue. And so they are set into a tizzy and have to sort of figure out what to do about that. And you also have, early on, you find out that Jane in this story, had gone through a bad breakup and needed someone to split rent with. And hence that is the motivation for my Bennett or Elizabeth to come into New York in the first place among her own issues. So that's another little financial incentive that we can all, if you've lived in New York or anywhere with a high rent situation, the practical does outweigh any emotional burden of a major breakup. And you do need to find someone to split that rent with. So that did seem to be resonant.
I really loved how you played with the idea of family and kind of leaned that into the burlesque idea of family, which is more of a chosen family aspect. So can you talk to me about our Bennett sisters, so to speak, and some of the other cast of characters?
Absolutely. They were so much fun to write. So that was one thing where I, as I'm outlining in my notebook, the ideas, the main characteristics of the original sisters, and then what would their parallel or their updated version look like. So you have Jane, who in this version is a male lounge singer. Basically, he performs at the club with everyone else, and he is also Bennett's roommate, so they go way back as well. And he starts a relationship with Charles Bingley, who is a potential investor for the club. That's not super spoilery. I mean, you'd get there in like 2 chapters, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then you have Gin and Tonic are the twins, but not actual twins, who are the aerialists. And they take on the roles of the slightly more, I would say, officer-centric sisters from the original. There's not really a Mary, like sorry to the Mary stands, but like.
Are there Mary stands? Because let's be real, like Mary is great for comic relief, I feel like, but.
Unintentional comedy, Mary's right there for you. But like, I don't know. I mean, there's those who are like, I'm Mary, I will read. Like, that's great, but we can
maybe they are
fine. You can be, so does Lizzie. It's great. And then filling in more or less the Charlotte role in spirit, not necessarily in much else, is Ming Dynasty, another one of the performers who is probably my favorite person to write.
Oh, Ming was a delight.
Ming's the best. I mean, let's be honest. She gets a lot of good screen time, as it were, page time, really. So she has sort of the voice of wisdom / bad ideas as well. I mean, she's the angel and the devil on the shoulder. So I know
I
where
mean,
she's
most
coming
of her ideas are not really bad.
Not bad. Yeah. I mean, she's not wrong. It's just,
No.
like maybe not the best timing all the time.
No.
And then you have Andrea as well. And she's the manager of the club. And she is pretty much Mrs. Bennett. Unfortunately, and this still pains me, I did not get in any reference to her nerves, which is such a
Her poor nerves.
I know. Just please have some little
I
compassion.
wish I had a hanky.
I know, exactly. You can just imagine it. Like it's happening it's internal. She's just afraid.
I felt like she was a much more realistic modern version of what we would expect, though, because I feel like Mrs. Bennett now kind of doesn't fly. We're like, could you stop?
I know it's a little heavy-handed. This one's a little more subtle. I mean, again, she's not like, classic.
I mean, it's burlesque. We're not super subtle.
Yeah, not super subtle, but like, she thinks she's conniving. So in a good way, in a hopeful way.
So I really loved the sort of love letter to burlesque that this novel also is. It's one of the things that I really enjoyed about it. Is one of the beautiful things about burlesque is that feeling of empowerment that comes along with that performance that people don't necessarily understand. And you have some really great conversations between Bennett and Darcy about the importance of that. And I think it's kind of a linchpin for the novel of like, you have to understand why this is important to me. So can you talk to us just a little bit about your personal experience in burlesque and kind of how that informs the novel?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I came into it, I keep telling this story, but I like it and it's relevant. But I came into it like so many epic tales with wine and internet. Like there was that sort of that overlap in the Venn diagram of an evening where I was like, it's been wine time. And also let's check out what's going on. And there was some article, I know that was very graceful typing. That was great. Some article, one of those horrible clickbait things, the bottom of the screen somewhere says 10 things men wish women would do with their boobs. And I'm like, that seems ambitious. Pretty sure they're just stoked you show up having them. But yeah, sure. I'm
letting you touch them seems to be high on the list. I don't know what else they need.
Yeah, like, there you go. Just appreciate. You should be so lucky. But yeah, one was like press them against glass, which was like, unflattering at best, dangerous at worst. Moving on. The next one was twirl tassels. And the little section begins, Joe Weldon of the New York School of Burlesque. And that was it. Like, didn't finish the remaining 8. Don't care. There's a link to the New York School of Burlesque because I'm living in Brooklyn at the time. And of course, New York has a school of burlesque. So follow through with that. And there is a confidence course with world famous Bob the next day. And I sign up. I'm in, I'm excited. Next morning, maybe less excited, definitely fuzzy headed, but I'm going to go do some confidence. This is going to be great. And it was funny. I actually, Bob lives in Austin now. And so I was able to like hand off my thank you copy to her the other day. And it was very sweet. I mean, it's been a decade. It's like you have no reason to remember me, but she's been very sweet about the whole thing. But, I admitted that I was late to class. And she was saying, I could hear through the door, it's so sad because I never let anyone in late. And we have one empty chair. And I was like, poetic time to knock. And so she took pity on me and let me in. And so first rule of confidence course is you don't talk about confidence course, but if it ever comes to your town, take it, folks. It's wonderful. And I loved it so much that I signed up for the intro course to burlesque. Just went for it. And it was great. So Jo Weldon, headmistress of the School of Burlesque herself, taught the class. And it was a series of weekends, just doing a couple hours at a time. First day 1, we were doing glove peels and tassel twirls, like getting down into it. And I was never great. I mean, despite her excellent tutelage, I cannot keep choreography in my head, which is something that I have also blessed for
kitten with.
Yeah, for King Caboodle. I'm like, you don't get, I was like, I can't get in that headspace, so neither will you. And so, but I did a couple of performances to the, to Oogie's theme from The Nightmare Before Christmas. So I had a full Oogie Boogie costume, like the headpiece. I had mesh that I could see through the eyes. It was great. Like you could unravel the sleeves and peel them off. It was excellent. I mean, probably not because I was not good, but I was committed to the bit.
Sounds awesome to me.
I mean, I only recently gave up the cost. Like I just had it around and I should have kept it. It's fine. Regrets. But anyway,
No regrets.
I know, none of that, no regrets. But she'd said, you know, if you're interested in kittening, to reach out. And so I did. And she said Duane Park, which is, I know, was a very good get. So they were still in their original location, which was in Duane actual park there in Tribeca, aptly named, roughly 4 blocks from my day job teaching swim lessons. So when, you know, parents from that program would see me, it was like one family and they were regulars. And so once they got over it, I was like, I'm wearing more technically than like you would see me in at the pool. So like, it's not scandalous, but their context is everything. So the dad was always like, oh my God, when I saw him at the pool. But I did that and I picked up for some amazing performers. You know, I thanked them in the acknowledgements that were just so inspirational. And just to see, I mean, even experiencing it myself, those 2 performances was just this giddy high that I've never had in my life outside of that. You're going for it. And it's not something, I mean, I say in the book that everyone can do, that everyone is comfortable doing. And it's not something that everyone wants to do, but it is such a space for joy and enthusiasm. And it's like the one thing where the only request of anyone involved in it is that you're having fun. If it's something that you think would be fun, go for it. And the audience is having a great time too. And it's all sorts of shapes and sizes and people and interests and themes and costuming that you might never have imagined. And just out there. A friend of mine did one about the Euro crisis in 2011, and it hit. It was great. Yeah. I had no idea what was going on. She had people's heads on like fans. It was fantastic.
Totally fine.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Absolutely not. I have a friend who does an act as Boba Fett and does not take off the Mandalorian helmet the entire time. So
that is the way.
Yeah, it is the way.
Yeah, she's committed. There you go. That's true Mando spirit. I respect that.
Absolutely. So one of the things about one of the reasons I wanted to bring up your kind of experience in burlesque is there's a moment that Kitten is talking to Darcy about learning how to tassel twirl, and a woman has a very emotional experience with that. I was curious if that had actually happened to you, and if you wanted to talk a little bit about it.
It did. So that first day in my Burlesque 101 course, we're doing the tassel thing. Everything's out, topless. You've got the tassels on, trying to like wing it, figure it out. And one gal starts crying. I mean, we've practiced it a little bit, but this one woman is just weeping, and everyone's kind of checking in. She's like, "No, it's fine. I've nursed 2 children. I never thought my boobs would ever do anything fun again, and they are." And it was just this moment for her where she like her body was hers again. It wasn't, to lure someone. It wasn't to nurture someone. It was hers, and she was having fun in this totally impractical, decorative, fun thing that serves no purpose but to bring just joy and silliness and look at what I can do. It's just for her. And she was just glowing. I mean, weeping. And we're like, yes, this is the moment. Like, I haven't reproduced yet, but this sounds great. It was so, I mean, I appreciate it now. My God. We were running into her at Duane Reade later, and she was just, hi, just still glowing after 20 minutes later or after the class. And it was just such a wonderful thing. So I was so happy to have that spot to write it. And that section came so late in the process, where it was part of the edits that my agent, in Tara's infinite wisdom, she says, you need to have something that really makes it more concrete. What is Bennett's, connection to this world? You see it, but you don't know what it means to her internally. You need examples. And I was like, fine. But then I was able to mine this real experience. It was great.
Well, and I think that honestly, to be honest with you, like I had a similar experience in terms of like how I came up in burlesque. I went through a burlesque school. I graduated. I did a lot of kittening, so I identified with Bennett on a lot of levels. But I had very similar experiences where people were learning to do the splits, and you would have that where you would maybe sink down an inch, and then you'd just end up in tears, and you wouldn't know why. Yeah. Because your body holds on to trauma and all that other kind of stuff. So it is a very emotional experience. But it is also a seductive experience, and this is a romance novel. So I want to lean back into. I think one of the things that I really loved about this is those moments where you were able to use that sort of seductive nature of burlesque to sort of differentiate between real intimacy, but also that sort of like allure that comes with burlesque and what that brings out in people, because Darcy has a very hot and cold relationship with what he sees on stage. So talk to me a little bit about how you brought that to life.
Yeah, I mean, his issue with it is he says it's artificial, like it's not real. And Bennett's like, duh. I mean, it's
this is not my real hair. No one thinks it is.
And they're like, this not naturally occurring. And you're surprised how? But and he has a hard time. She's like, well, like what was the last play you saw? Well, The Lion King. She's like, were you bummed there weren't real lions? I mean, how far are you gonna take this? And so and that's a great comment that's in the Burlesque Handbook I keep name dropping her, by Jo Wilton, who literally wrote the book.
She is lovely. You are right to name drop her. She's wonderful.
Amazing. And she's the best. I mailed off her copy last week. But she refers to it as the art and the artifice. And there's such the creative aspect to it, obviously with the costuming and things, and everything is so exaggerated that, I mean, we are in performing accentuating the things that are traditionally, sexy and done in a subtle, suggestive way, and just making it as over the top as possible.
Less
and drawing
subtle.
it out like, what this? I got the wrong neckline. I don't have cleavage anymore anyway. But it was like memories. It's fine. But and Kitten actually doesn't mind too much that he differentiates, because she's like, well, real intimacy for her isn't something that you would put on a stage. She's like, that's something that, I mean, it's named intimacy. You keep it to yourself and the people you want to share it with in an intimate setting. I mean, if you want to go for it on stage, that's your version. But for her, she's like, I get that. But for her, taking off 98% of her clothing in public isn't an intimate act. This is a performative act. It would look different if they were just them using that. So he still can't quite help enjoying the gal mincing about in very little clothing and doing a prolonged glove peel, but he doesn't see it as actual relationship material. But she's like, yeah, I know, it's my job.
It's not the same.
I know.
I really love that differentiation, and I love the conversation that they continue to have throughout the book about it. I think it's a really important conversation for people to kind of understand, because I think one of the things burlesque dancers have to do when they are getting into intimate relationships is sort of deal with this baggage of people's feelings about that. I can't tell you how many performers I know who were with someone and then they broke up because they were like, he didn't want me to be on stage anymore, and that is not your decision.
Yeah, exactly. It's my body and I do what I want.
Yeah. So I could talk about the burlesque side of the book all night, and I absolutely would, but I also want to talk about the fact that Bennett sort of contains multitudes. So can you talk to us a little bit about how Bennett ends up in New York and the sort of the thing that really brings her to kind of address that crisis in her life?
Yeah, well, she had a bit of a confidence shaker. So she went to school for interior design and had an internship. And there was a bit of as the back of the book will say, a betrayal, derailed that. And she hightailed it to the East Coast to try and recover. And so she is a glorified receptionist by day, which is something I called myself for a while. So I was like, I'm taking that, using it. And works as a stage kitten at night on the weekends. But she's realizing that she's gotten, she still has the eye for design, and she sees, potential. So when she finds out that the business or the venue is selling, maybe, and might be considering renovations, she can't help but entertain more ideas and start writing them down. And so again, she encounters another venue that really gets her attention, and she has a whole other file for that one. And then, where could it be? But she connects it to her burlesque life, in that she finds, she's found so much confidence and acceptance just through being part of the scene, and realizes argument in defending the scene that, well, what is she doing with that confidence? She's not applying it in ways that, could help her get back on her feet in a way that she really wants to. As much as she enjoys her life as it is now, there's still that element that she's not being able to acknowledge and isn't working with. So she needs to be able to bring it all together.
I think one of the things I also really loved about this is, if you love Pride and Prejudice, you love the relationship between Lizzie and Jane. Like that is such a core tenet of that book, and all the adaptations of it is that relationship between those two sisters. And I think you did such a lovely job of creating that intimacy with Jane, who is not Bennett's sister, but is in so many ways. Yeah. So can you talk to me about any, do you have any moments of their relationship that were so special for you? Or
I just love, the initial scene where, there's this whole banter back and forth with a bunch of the members of the.
And I must say, you give good banter. This book has a lot of it.
If I had my druthers, I would just have floating heads bantering. But then you're like, oh, you have to have bodies and context.
Rude.
What now? Rude. No thanks. Anyway, but that was part of that intervention I mentioned with my writing group. They're like, you do really great, well-adjusted late 20s people hanging out, having conversations. It's like, you can stop there, but they didn't. More feedback followed, but that's fine. They weren't wrong. But Jane, and the way Jane just sort of bursts out of, the closet that he's warming up his voice in. And there's this whole Jane dots his eyes with circles. And she's like, oh, or they're charming. He's like, do you really think so? They just have this rapport of, there's just so much shorthand between them. And that I love that you get in a long-term friendship, family relationship, that kind of thing, that just, you can feel that they have roots. Even though they haven't been super close friends for a long time, what they've meant to each other in the time they've been together is significant. And the way, she cares so much when Jane gets hurt is very she loves her Jane, and how protective, obviously, she is of him, being very concerned about Jane is fragile emotionally at times. Got to keep an eye out. So this Bingley guy might, she's going to keep an eye on him as well. If he hurts Jane,
pull it back.
Take him down.
Well, and I think too, one of the things about their relationship that's so lovely is that, I feel like in most adaptations, Jane is the sort of emotional heart of the story. Lizzie can be a bit cold, and I feel like Lizzie's not cold in this. Bennett is quite warm throughout the book, but I feel like Jane is really but remember to take risks. Remember to put yourself out there. It's important not to always play it safe.
Yeah,
so
I like that. Jane pushes her to take those risks, like you said, and I love that. Whereas Jane is coming to terms with his own past romantic life. He has some unhappiness there, but he's taking the risk, and that inspires Bennett to do the same. So I love that about them.
I love it about them too, and I didn't write them, so good job.
Well, there we go.
So I'm going to pop in and say that we've got about 10 minutes left of just you and I talking. So if anyone has any questions that they want to ask Vanessa, pop those down below. There's a little button to put in Q&A questions, and we'll get to those as we kind of get a little bit further along. But before we get to letting other people ask you questions, I have more for you. So I think it must be such a delight to write a Wickham. And so I did enjoy the sort of trappings that Wickham took on in this one, a little bit of a fintech bro sort of a situation. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you came on that particular choice for Wickham himself?
It just felt right. He comes in his natty reds. He's never in normal jeans. And my poor copy editor is like, what are natty reds? J. Crew, don't worry about it. There's a subculture devoted to it. Don't worry.
The people who know will know.
I know, and good on you maybe for not knowing. This reflects well on your life choices. You've never seen any on the floor of an apartment. Good for you. And he has a shirt maybe unbuttoned a little bit too deep. And, aviators hanging there. There were just so many, like you said, trappings that worked. Maybe a shorthand that he's cool, but a little try hard. And the banter's good.
but not as good. Not as good as it is with
Good.
Darcy.
Exactly. I know that was the thing. I had to like ramp up the Darcy banter because I was like, man, you get this. And if you think about it, I mean, I did a podcast this weekend and we discussed Bridget Jones's Diary and the film version, and where you spend so much time with the Wickham character there. And it's just longing glances from poor Darcy until he like finally has his moment to come undone, which is very satisfying. But
yes,
you can like, yes, they do. Anyway, but that was, I mean, it's very much a Hugh Grant kind of swaggering, comes out of the elevator with a ding and just sort of strolls in version of Wickham. So I feel like that, whether I knew it or not, I'm saying it now. I don't know that I did it consciously, but I'm going to roll with it now. It was definitely him.
That was 100% the inspiration, and there's no other talking about it. I think one of the things that I really loved was that there were things that were different than the original Pride and Prejudice. It's not a super strict retelling. I think a lot of times when you read retellings, they are like, okay, here's the analog to the ball at Meryton. Here's the analog to Jane getting a cold. Here's the, and so some of those things are definitely, those major beats are still there in the story and very recognizable. But I felt like it was more in the lines of like Clueless, where like the general story vibe is the same, but it's not. And I really loved the pacing of this. I was unprepared for the sort of second incident of the book. I don't want to give away anything because it's great when it surprises you, because you are just like, oh, we're just going to a meeting and yes. But I really did enjoy that about the book. So did you deliberately do that, or did it just kind of flow out of you that way?
It depends. I did, again, notebook structure, the beats that I really liked that I wanted to have, like you said, analogs to. I wanted very specific moments. So, having to get, Bennett overhearing Darcy saying something impolite, and having Jane's cold really be something different, but it was something I experienced. That was a New York thing that I got to live through and be on Bennett's side of it. It wasn't
my goodness
me getting taken out, but I got to be a first responder, and I was a lifeguard. So I was like, I am way in over my head, but no one else is stepping up. So anyway, we're speaking so vaguely, but you should get the book and find out.
You should get the book and find out, because it was one of the first things that I was like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That got real, because it had been. What else? But yeah, the challenge was actually pulling back on what I didn't end up using. So there isn't a Mr. Bennett analog, and there isn't a Mr. Collins. Though I initially had the MC name Tom Collins, just like for fun, because it's a good MC name. But then I figured people be waiting for him to, again,
be a creep with Bennett,
potatoes, and make weird, proposals. So that had to go. Became Johnny Royale. Give a little Beastie Boys shout out, as is only right. And of course, various betrayals and developments and lies and revelations all had to have their moments. So, but yeah, it was challenging to go like, again, like, sorry, no nerves for Mrs. Bennett, but alas, but we can still move the story along. So it was more about plot progression than, strict adherence to the original.
I really enjoyed it as someone who does really deeply love the original, but who also loves a good retelling. It was such a delight to be like, I know what's going to happen overall, but I don't know what's going to happen. I think that's one of the things that's so difficult to balance in a retelling, is keeping that tension that keeps the audience engaged. Because if I feel like I know if I know the whole plot of the book, why am I going to read it? Yeah,
like, what's this version of this thing going to be? And so hopefully it was interesting. Certainly, Jane.
I'm here to tell you, dear reader, it is. And I didn't write it, and I didn't know Vanessa before this, so I am allowed to say that, and you should believe me.
There you go. Third party here. Boom.
Third party recommendation. So it was delightful for me. I'm gonna throw us over to some Q&As in just a minute, because we've got a couple of good ones that have come through. But one of my last big trips before everything kind of closed down last year. I was in New York and I went to Duane Park for the first time.
Yay.
So it was such a delight. When I was reading the book, that was what I was imagining was Duane Park. And so I was so delighted when I read your acknowledgments that was a part of your inspiration. Obviously not the location that they are currently in. There was no revolving stage that rises out of the floor in your book.
Well, I know. Oh my, that's a new development too, because I was with them in their original location and then followed them over to the second one. And that's when I was like, or it's baby time. And then made that decision. And actually there was a point 6 months in where they were like, hey, can you fill in for someone? I was like, you don't want this there unless you do.
That's a whole other conversation.
No, like hard no if you want this there. But but yeah, they've done incredible stuff. And they've done a really good job through COVID as well. They've had mass performances. They've done outdoor go-go dancing and things. So I've just been following along and still keep in touch with some of the performers. It's been really neat to see that they're still keeping things going. So,
oh yeah. Well, and it's delightful for people, anyone who is actually very familiar with the burlesque scene that knows, some of the New York greats, so to speak, that like Joe, or Bob still counts, even though Bob is not there anymore. Exactly. But I had to put on my Amber Ray accoutrements.
Outstanding. Oh, Amber's so great. You may recognize one of Amber's signature moves in Ming's performance. When
I might have. We're going to talk about this for a little bit because it is such a delightful detail for people who love burlesque, and it's so odd for people who don't know anything about it.
Yeah, like it's possible.
Tassel twirling is a thing that you do in burlesque, and largely you do that by shaking your boobs back and forth like this.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do
jump
like side. Yeah, you can like direct it. Yeah.
But generally speaking, like twirling one tassel is quite hard, and you basically do it by moving one arm at a time. And it's something that not everybody can do. I've been doing burlesque for 10 years and I still am not very good at it. But there are a very select few performers, mostly who have implants, who can twirl a tassel merely by flexing their pecs. And so that is a trick that Amber does, and it's a delight to watch.
It is. It's a delight, and then having seen it, to watch other people see it for the first time, because the gasps just like the room overflows, because she does this little peeky thing, like bra's coming off. No, it's not, but bloop, and they don't know what's happening. And it's amazing.
It's a magic trick with your boobs. What kind of trick could be better?
It's the best of tricks.
I did want to talk a little bit about your editing process, and this is going to segue us into a couple of the questions that have come up here. But you talk a lot about having to edit down the book and all of those other kind of things. So I would love to know, is there any sort of like analog moment that you ended up having to cut from this that you're not putting into something else, so you can tell us about it?
No, most of them were like moments that I had clearly written for myself, because when I was writing, and I did get that feedback as of an online group that I had found through a website called Critique Circle, and they have cues that you can submit to by genre. It's really great. But I had a team, basically of about 8 people, who followed me through the process and were giving me feedback the whole time, and it was fantastic. But one of the things that they would come up like, this is really good. Like, the scene is great. You wrote this for you. It's not serving your story. So it's not for the story. It's for like, Vanessa's having fun. So this 800 word section with this Hasidic couple on a date at the rock climbing gym, clearly a memory. Yes, it was, that you are using for a nice little mise en scène. However, slowing the pacing down. So get rid of it. And I was like, no. And then my editor came back with 6,000 words of trimming, and I screamed. And my husband from the second floor of our old house was like, "Are you okay?" And I again said, "No." And and then emailed my wonderful agent, who talked me down. It was like, just, step away and take a couple of days to process that this is actually what line edits are, because that's in the name, is line edits. You're editing out lines. Fun fact. And so like digest, and also like that's their job, and she might be like good at it because it's her job. So give some credit. And also, you don't have to take all of it out. And she's done the hard work for you, because now you don't have to think about it. You can just put things back in. And she was right. She was so wonderfully right. So I went through it, and like, yes, that 800 word section is on a file elsewhere. And it's still charming and still totally unnecessary. And I get that now. I mean, it was years of being told, and they were right all along, and it's great. And they know that. I think I emailed them, but
you acknowledged it in the book too.
They did.
You said thank you many times.
And it was great. Like, look at that. It's not there. So you were right in the long run. Maybe, I was kicking and screaming. But yeah, it was neat just to see how much tighter it was and much more efficient once some of that, for me, writing was taken out. That's basically what I call it. It's fine.
Totally. Well, I will say that you ended up with a very tight book. Like, it is, the pacing is, I won't call it breakneck because it is more enjoyable than that. Like, you take some time to savor things. But I did read it in a day.
Good.
I might have stayed up a little too late and woken up my partner with my reading light, but that's not the point.
It's fine.
There's nothing to see here.
No, you're good.
So that was a great answer. And it does hit most of the points of this question that we got in from Carly Wade, but I do want to read this to you and see if you have anything additional to add to it. So Carly says, "Hi, Vanessa. So excited for your launch. How was it transitioning from writing alone and with critique groups to working with an agent and an editor?"
Yeah, that was different. I mean, Carly was in one of my critique groups in Seattle, and it's so exciting to hear from her. Oh my God, where are you? Are you in Hawaii? Anyway, she's lived there.
You can let us know in the Q&A section if you want to, Carly.
She can answer. I'll check it out. Yeah, it was different because it was much, firmer, I guess. We're like, you need to have this cut down to be published as per your contract. So for one, you're gonna have to, but it was good to have someone who didn't, in the critique groups I've been part of, we've also become very close with everyone there. So I mean, the Seattle group, we'd go out and see movies all the time. I mean, it was great. We would just hang out and just go to a coffee shop and be like, I'm at Uptown, just shoot on an email. And then the rest of the group would converge and nothing would get done. And then we would go see Popstar, and
it would be great
movie. Exactly. And gave my line editor headaches because she thought it was a stage production. I was like, oh, we weren't fancy. This is an Andy Samberg film that you've overlooked, and you should go check it out. My line note responses are great. But it was a different process to have someone who was separate and saying, like, this is good, but for what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, the market that you're working with, you need to streamline, you need to, work within expectations. And that was fine because I'd already written it. So let's just bring it down. Or my agent's suggestion to, add to it and make that, give that one more resonant scene, which I can't imagine the book without at this point. That really is the linchpin. I mean, it solidifies their relationship even before they started entering into one. So that was critical.
Yeah. And Carly has another question. Thanks, Carly, for giving us a couple of good ones here. If you could adapt a certain appeal with any budget, who would you cast as your dynamic duo?
Oh my gosh.
But also tell us the rest of the cast too, because I don't want to just know Bennett and Darcy. I want to know everybody.
I know. I am so clueless as to in any of the youths. I'm like, I don't know who these people are.
You can pretend everyone is 10 years younger than they are. It's fine.
That would be great. Though I have to say, my pick for Jane is the actor who plays Eric on Sex Education. I mean, he's Nigerian English, and he is the most adorable human being, and he just has Jane energy, which is hard to come by, I think. And he looks fantastic with just a touch of eyeliner, and I just
very important.
And he's just wonderful, and also that show's really good. So there's also that. But I know I'm disappointing. I cannot come up with anyone for casting. I would like to have veto rights. I know my film and TV guy did send here's a list, and I was like, who are these people? They're very I was like, good for them. They seem to be doing well. They've got
swell
headshots and stuff. That's cute. I don't know who they are. Hope you're good.
Well, I feel equally stumped because I you talk about this in some of the literature that was sent to me for this interview.
Mhm.
You are a big fan of the 2005 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. I am
Yeah.
hardcore BBC 1995.
I mean,
There
they're
is
just
no Darcy
different
but Colin
animals.
Firth for me.
Oh, exactly. All the respect. And having watched Bridget Jones multiple times the past few weeks, he just has that like desperate, I keep saying he's desperate to be rumpled. Like just He's so starchy and he just wants to be unstarched. And she's the person for that. And she doesn't have to change anything about who she is. He's if once he gets it, it's great. So
Well, and what I love about that relationship in the book is that Darcy, as sort of Darcy comes to understanding, just as it is in the original Pride and Prejudice, he doesn't become a different person. He just learns and grows. And that is like the sort of core lesson of Pride and Prejudice anyway, is that first impressions aren't always right, and that we can grow into learning to love people, and that sometimes someone who might seem super awesome on paper and in person, like Wickham, turns out to be a total piece of shit.
They're garbage. And then sometimes you just really have to yell at a guy and tell him what all his problems are, and then have him listen and grow.
Yeah,
and that's great.
It's very important.
We love that.
We love that. Jason Caldwell would like to bug in and say, not Titus Burgess for Jane.
What's that? I missed that.
Not Titus Burgess for Jane.
I mean, I see that and I love that. It's just he's aged out. So, but oh my God. I mean, again, like young, I know I'm thinking of him as being his young self on Kimmy Schmidt. He'd always have like the kid in play, the flat top. Like no flat top for Jane, but
alas,
I think he would, and to give him at the computer as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I feel like for me, he's maybe a little too old, but it's Taye Diggs for me, always.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, that's the right answer to most things.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty human. Oh my God. And he can sing, which is like a requirement. So
yeah. Absolutely. I love that moment. And this is the moment when he decides to sing Nina Simone. Like that, yes. That energy, like that feeling of that energy, like when somebody decides to do the thing that they are so good at, it is such a burlesque moment and such a performer moment. And I think you captured that energy so well in the book.
That was one thing I read that was like, when you're describing someone singing, don't describe the singing, describe the audience's reaction to it. I was like, that's so much easier. Like, thank you, advice. And that was such a fun thing to show as well, because that is like, you know what's going on based on what people's reaction is. Like, I can't, he sings like a bird, like that's dumb. He is having this effect on this crowd, and that's what matters anyway.
Yes, like casting that spell over the room. And I feel like that's something that you get at burlesque shows, that there are so few experiences that are like it, where you will just like suddenly be like, I know one of my the other MCs at my club talks a lot about, like, if you need to go make out in a dark corner, we understand.
I get it. Like, grab the closest happy body and just like do what you need to do. There was one performer in particular who was at Duane Park. Cuneo was his name, and he had that effect. And he'd be up in the dressing room. We're like, "Hi, you're in warm up your voice. That's cool. That's real neat."
It's fine. I don't have anything to do.
Yeah. And not even like, and he was just super charming, chatty anyway, but it was just knowing like this person is capable of this amazing thing and he's going to bring it, was just something else. So
absolutely. Yeah. We have another question from Natalie Drummond, and I'm gonna come to this one as for our closer, because I feel like it's such a perfect pin. But there was another, speaking of Junio, it made me think of your description of Esteban, when the moment before he sort of throws Bennett into Darcy at Maryton, where you're like, Esteban, who says this is like a tasty individual, Esteban could flirt with peeling paint. Yeah. And I just felt like that was such a perfect description of like that New York service industry sensibility, where they're just like, I can make anything sound fabulous. It was just such a very New York thing.
Oh yeah. You can go either way. And like, also like, yeah, make you feel deeply unworthy. I'm like, we're at a pizza place, but you have a really good command of your salesmanship, and yeah, okay.
I'm maybe in love with you. I think it'll pass.
I know, fine, okay. Am I just a perennial suck up? Because you're just really cool. Okay. Do you like me?
And I did want to talk about, there is one other moment that happens in the book. Well, I don't want to talk about that moment, actually. I lied, because it is such a pivotal moment for the book and I don't want to ruin things. Okay. I know. I'm having a conversation with myself. Conversation with Vanessa King and Viola Vainglory and Viola Vainglory.
Perfect.
But one of the things that you did really well that you incorporated into the book is this idea of consent. And I felt like that was really well executed in a particular scene between our two leads. And I don't want to give too much away, but can you talk to me about why that was important for you in this book?
Well, because so much burlesque is, I mean, it is the performer is on stage and they're making that choice. They have consented to be up there and to reveal however much or however little they want. They're emphasizing what they choose and draw out and hypnotize you the way they want to. And that feeds into, I mean, they've consented to that. They've made that choice. And that feeds into certain scenes with the characters that are very satisfying, I'd like to think. But,
they are. As someone who didn't write it, I can also say they were very satisfying. I might have reread a couple of them.
There you go. They're good. Just revisit. It's fine. Gotta get you in all the details.
Take a little moment.
Just to make sure that, you know, people are on board with what's happening, especially if you're aware that they've experienced something that hasn't been as consenting, or even just a quick moment if they're shaken by something. Just, you really want to take your time and acknowledge your partner's comfort and needs and interest, and that is very purposefully done in a particular scene in the book, in multiple scenes in the book.
I was really very impressed by that.
Well, good. I mean, it's because people are like, oh, you know, you can't ask, it's not like, it can be deeply sexy, watch me, or read this instead. I'm not going to enact that. That's fine. You can read it, but they
can read it. They can get some good examples so that they can learn how to incorporate it into their own practices.
Exactly. See, it's mentoring, basically. They're welcome.
You're here to keep it sexy, but also keep it consensual. It's very important.
Exactly. Consexy, if you will. I regret that. That wasn't that great.
It's fine.
It's fine.
We do talk about that in burlesque shows, though. Like, that is a part of what we talk about when I am up there emceeing. I have to, every time I'm up there, I have to be like, you cannot touch the performers unless you are invited to do so. If you're not sure that you've been invited, you haven't been invited.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you'll know. They let you know.
They will let you know. But I love that idea of like, consent isn't just mandatory. Consent is also very sexy. So I just love that you managed to work that into that book. And I think you did that very successfully. So yay. Good on you. So unless we have any other questions, I'm going to lean into our last one here from Natalie Drummond. And it is the perfect question to close out our chat, which is, what's next for Vanessa King?
Oh my goodness. Well, for one, Natalie, thank you. I do have my champagne that you guys got when we were still in state. Thank you. And for me, it is for one, don't buy a house and move within like 7 weeks of your pub date. Inadvisable, like rookie mistake. Definitely won't be doing that again for like a lot of reasons, but inconvenient, like not a lot of like
space to get things done.
Just just general energy in the brain region for doing creative things outside of hot gluing head dresses, which I've made ever so many of for giveaways and the like.
They look beautiful. I saw that on your Instagram.
I know. I opted not to wear one tonight because I've just been wearing them so much. You have to take a break, you know.
Well, your hair does look very fabulous as is, so we would hate to
like 80% of my personality, so I really have to work it. But
you're making me miss my undercut very strongly. Anyway,
this is it for life. Like, I'm done with hair. The sooner it goes gray, the less I have to color it. It's going to be great. But I have a major revision of another retelling, Austinish retelling spin. You know, the stepsister to Pride and Prejudice, of course, Sense and Sensibility, the oft overlooked by comparison.
I love Sense and Sensibility. My husband and I got engaged while we were in a stage production of that. And I was playing his horrible sister while he was playing Edward. It was a delight.
Oh my god. Oh, and she's the worst. That's so
She was the best though. Oh my god, playing the villain is the best.
It's so great. She's so conniving. It's so great.
She is the worst.
Clearly, they don't want you to actually like give them money. That's silly. Like, just make sure they don't die, maybe.
They'll be fine.
But I have I have like, 90,000 words written, and all along my poor agent is saying, show me. And I was like, no, it's gonna be great. I have this in the bag. And then the entire summer was devoted to, okay, you need to write a synopsis because this is not, I would send her one and she's like, no, but those are definitely words, which is
that is the English language that you have just
I know, and
sent
check
to
that
me.
out. Masterful. But yeah, so finally whittled it down, and then of course completely changed certain plot points and personalities, or at least backgrounds. So once the dust settles sort of on the launch thing, I will dive back into that. And I'm really excited about it. There's a lot of themes that I'm kind of working with that I'm really happy about. And I've been reading a lot of memoirs lately. So kind of getting other people's lived experiences have been very interesting. Crying in H Mart, if you have the metal right now, like you really have to commit yourself to it, because it's, you know, not light reading, but it really was fantastic. And so it's been it's an interesting sort of perspective to work with, at least as far as coming across somewhat knowledgeable. God, that was so great. And I will be curious to see what people's reaction to my Eleanor is, because she's sort of Eleanor by way of Fleabag, which I resist saying. I find that to be the pinnacle of television in general. That second season is just everything. But if I dare make that hint of a comparison, we'll see how people think.
Now I'm like, how can we get Andrew Scott into the television or film adaptation of a certain
stroll by with a fox trailing after him? There's someone here. Oh my God, the whole fox thing. But yeah, so I'm really excited about it once I get to look at it again. And there's a lot of fun, and it does take place in the same world. So this Eleanor is the accountant for a particular club, and so Ming is very much front and center. Like, she's
so glad to hear it.
Oh yeah, no, she's there, and she's dispensing all sorts of wisdom, and it's great, and just moral support and general, you know, nasty shimminess. It's great. So so that's what's up.
Yeah. Anything you're like down the line maybe going to retouch that new adult novel that you set to the side?
You know, I did fit in the characters. They sort of come in as the gardeners, or her, you know, in the original. So they're her cousin and her cousin's fiance come in. And so those were the original ones. So I have it in the back of my head to do sort of a prequel-y Persuasion version, which, you know, of them, because so much of the angst that was in the Drord book is a sort of like they almost and then didn't get together stories.
Yeah.
So to get into that would be very fun. So
remind me of the cousin's name. Gail's is all that's coming to me right now.
Exactly. And Chloe. Yes.
Chloe, I want to be played by Awkwafina, for the record.
Well, the voice, that would be great to have her voice. That's so funny.
I mean, I know that is the opposite of how she's described physically, but like there was like, hey man, there's a beverage here. That line, I was like, it's only Awkwafina for me in that moment.
It was there's a lot of Big Lebowski references in that drawer one. So I had to get that in. I was like, hey. I also would like to submit that I believe I am the only person to ever, and whether it's a good idea or not, well, remains to be seen, get a Jim Gaffigan joke in a sex scene. So kudos to whoever finds it. And also
I'm going to have to reread. I will be ashamed that I did not remember it the first go around, but it was a pretty steamy sex scene. So I might have gotten distracted.
On, you know, the action.
Oh, I think I might know what it is now. Oh, no.
If so, that's great. It was subtle.
Yeah, this is light. So yes, so next up we've got your Sense and Sensibility adaptation, continuing in the world of a certain appeal. I love it. So I know that Becca threw down in the chat down below where you can actually purchase this book online.
Yeah.
Becca has rejoined the chat. I highly recommend buying it in its physical form because it's just beautiful. I love this cover art.
I love the cover. And if anyone wants to know, I did at my website, which I think is VanessaLKing.com. I never know, it just populates on its own. I have a blog post on how this came to be, because it was a process. And so
it turned out beautifully.
It was good. I was able to thank the artist today. She mentioned it on Instagram. And I was like, you put her stepping on his shoe. And for that, I thank you. It was great. Oh, the cat opened the door. What a great way to end things. Don't know how that happened.
Hey. Well, that finishes it up for me. Thank you so much for talking with me, Vanessa. I had a great
Thank
time.
you so much for picking up the call of
Absolutely.
Facebook.
You were like, I need an MC and burlesque dancer who also loves Austin. And I was like, it's me. That's me. She's talking about me.
He's like, that's right. That worked out perfectly. Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone at Beaumont, for putting this together. So great.
Thank you so much. We were so honored to host this event. And yeah, just again, please use the link in the chat to support both Vanessa and Belmont Books. We'd really appreciate it. And yeah, have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
And Ruben, you're just going to join us for a second?
Oh, Ruben.
He's such a sad face. His life is great. He's fine. It's good. He just looks sad. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.